Springfield Talk 1041. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Nick Reed. Look, everyone, Sarah Myers is here also.
Hi, how are ya? Hope you're
Just
doing good.
streaming live, YouTube, Springfield's Talk 1041. You can find us there. We've got some of the latest information, including polling number yesterday. Harry Etten of CNN went over some of the polling numbers regarding the capture of Maduro and the trial, and increasingly Americans support it. His conclusion, which on one hand is duh, but on the other hand, I think it does evade a lot of people. And as the numbers go up of support, he's like, it just seems like ultimately Americans like success. And because this went really well, and he also cited the polling numbers regarding the operation that took out the nuclear capabilities of Iran, and how support for such a move prior to it was underwater, whereas afterwards, when it was successful, and yet again, it's a difference in leadership. The military being utilized in a successful manner, and making a tremendous difference in terms of the trajectory of the world. It went off really well, and then so support went up for it. That's the thing about these decisions. And it seems like it goes without saying, but it doesn't. So many times, should we or shouldn't we? And honestly, it ends up being determined by the outcome. Venezuela is a great example. If 10 years down the road, Venezuela is either, on its way to or even back to the point it was several decades ago, before socialism took over, when it was the vacation destination slot in South America, or spot rather. I mean, it's where the wealthy went. It's where people went to vacation. It was the wealthiest, and it wasn't just a great place to visit. It was a great place to live. Venezuelans had incredible quality of life compared to so many of its other neighbors. And if it ends up back like that, in addition to no longer having a footprint from our enemies that are increasingly trying to, and in the case of Venezuela, successfully planting their flags in our hemisphere, that being Iran, Russia, and China, then people, the left won't talk about it, but it will be seen as, well, that was the right move. That was the right thing to do. If, on the other hand, 10, 20 years from now, we look back and it's even worse, that Venezuela is in shambles, and not only that, but because of its instability, that instability spread to other countries throughout South America. I'm giving two extremes here, of course, and it's worse than it ever was. Then guess what? The decision was wrong. And that seems obvious, but it really isn't. It isn't something that we think about so much when we discuss, is this the right thing or the wrong thing? Because sometimes the answer is, we don't know. You can make an argument morally before you know the outcome. Regardless of the outcome, it was the right thing to do morally. It was the right thing to do from a humanitarian standpoint, which arguably even that could turn out to be something that backfires. But nonetheless, we tend to not want to accept the reality that, strategically speaking, and even when it comes to, is this in the best interest of America, which is a legitimate question that's being asked right now. We're going to talk about that later. How is this in the best interest of the United States of America? You know what? We may not know right now. We know that that's the intent. Or at least, if I suppose it depends on your perspective. I would argue that that is the Trump perspective, that this is in the best interest of the United States of America, and it is ultimately the desire is one that is part of America first. But will the results actually turn out that way? We don't know. This is one of the differences between somebody that is a true leader versus somebody who gets elected as a leader. The vast majority of leaders play it safe. They just do, and I get it. It's because, frankly, the world and oftentimes the American people will turn against them if it doesn't turn out well. If they take on that responsibility as a leader of gambling, knowing that things could go poorly. And then if they do go poorly, most Americans turn on them. And they know that, so they play it safe. Which is frankly why real meaningful change for the better so often doesn't occur. Trump just doesn't operate that way. And it is of no surprise when you recognize how it is that Trump has operated his entire life. And one of the reasons that he is a success, he is a decision maker. And sometimes that means swinging for the fences, knowing and accepting that it could backfire, that it may not go the way that you want, but that's life. You just accept it and then you move on. That is a much, a lot of the conflict and discussion that is going on right now regarding much of what it is that Trump does is because culturally we're not accustomed to a president that operates in this manner, that makes bold decisions, really truly bold decisions. They make safe decisions. And if you don't make bold decisions, yes, you particularly in short term, you often don't have to worry so much about big disappointments, but you also don't get big positives. And that's why you get that sense sometimes, well, nothing ever changes. Everything's always the same. And we're accustomed to operating that way. So when there is a president that comes along and that takes these outside of the box, bold steps that most presidents never would because of the possible repercussions, because of the gamble involved, because of the potential disastrous downside to it, it makes us uneasy. We're just not used to it. Even when it's a success oftentimes, we're like, well, yeah, but sure got lucky there. And this isn't a judgment of one perspective or the other. It's just a recognition of why it is. I try, and Trump is an incredible conduit for this exercise, for me, to recognize that oftentimes my instincts as a human being are based off of what I'm accustomed to. This whole discussion, and we'll talk about the Greenland thing coming up. Oh, it's just appalling. Why you say something that's awful? Well, why not? Now, my instinct is like a lot of yours. Why is Trump even saying that stuff? Because that's what we're accustomed to, not thinking these bold thoughts. Trump has his reasons, and they're smart reasons based off of thinking down the road, well beyond his life here on Earth, and the fact that China and Russia has been making inroads, China in particular, our enemies, into our part of the world, in Venezuela, up around Greenland as well. Trump also is different from the standard leader. Instead of, oh, well, I don't have to worry about that. That's not going to happen during my term, particularly if it comes to making bold moves that may be politically damaging. Why on earth would I take steps to try and prevent something damaging from happening to the United States that may not happen for 20 or 30 years? That's the difference between somebody who's elected to be a leader versus someone who truly is a leader. Doesn't mean he's right, but he's willing to do it. He's willing to look 20, 30, 40 years down the road, and he sees, he understands people. He understands what China's doing. He knows that when it comes to Greenland, China they are making strategic moves, while the United States has long been, and the rest of the world, like, oh, well, what do we have to worry about? And when you think about it intellectually, and I mean, to me anyhow, I see what he's saying. That makes sense. So then why does it instinctually make so many of us uneasy or react the way we do when he talks about, in a somewhat serious manner, taking over Greenland? Not necessarily in a hostile way, but just taking over Greenland. Because we're not used to that. We're not used to that boldness. We're not used to that, taking off the helmet and just going in full force. We like these safe decisions that are like in this little box of acceptable decisions. Some of which we call bold, but they're really not that bold. As a person, and by the way, this is one of the reasons Trump has been successful in the private sector, because he does the things that other people are not willing to, because they're not safe. And yeah, in the private industry, Trump had some big losses, but he's also had a lot of really big wins. I've taken, maybe for my own sanity, if you will, this approach of not emotionally micromanaging in my mind every single thing Trump does, because we tend to do that, and it makes sense. And instead, sometimes, like with Venezuela, every little thing with Venezuela, well, he said this, and what about that, and what, and being like, you know what? He kind of has earned just a little bit of respect for a track record on this stuff. It doesn't mean that you never question. It doesn't mean that one never criticizes or thinks, well, I don't know if I agree with that. But when it all washes out, I have to remind myself, he tends to surprise. He tends to be the one person who was right when it comes to so much of this stuff. And he bats over the average, that's for sure. And, we just, I think that we don't give him enough of the credit that he has proven that he deserves. And like I said, it doesn't mean that every step he makes, every bold move he makes is going to work out perfectly and we shouldn't question it. But some of the hysterics that we allow ourselves to get all whipped up into, like maybe that's why people like Donald Trump are the people who have the major successes, while those of us don't so much. We got weather coming up in a moment, delayed a bit on the news, yet here it is.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see cloudy skies with a high near 68. Tonight, a 40% chance of showers throughout the night, otherwise mostly cloudy with a low around 52. For your Thursday, showers and possibly a thunderstorm with a high near 66. And taking a look at Friday, mostly sunny with a high near 59.
Yesterday morning, a rapidly evolving story regarding post made from Department of Homeland Security noting that a Hilton hotel had canceled reservations of members of immigration enforcement and law enforcement in a number of different capacities, and canceled the reservations and essentially said, just tell all of your other friends we don't book your type, talking about immigration enforcement. And so that, of course, got out there, and then Hilton as a corporation was like, hey, this is an independently owned Hilton, but we've talked to them. This is not acceptable. This is not at all acceptable, and the problem has been remedied. We do not allow discrimination. Well, it was just subsequent to that. By the end of the show yesterday, there was an independent journalist that had, and again, these independent journalists leaps and bounds beyond what traditional journalists do today. And so he goes to that very hotel, filming it, of course, undercover. I mean, he didn't let it be known that it was being filmed, and tried to check out 10 rooms for the Department of Homeland Security, and was told, I can't do that. We do not check out rooms to your kind. To which the independent journalist, posing as someone from DHS, said, well, but it was on the news that had been taken care of. And the guy, he was really nice, the kid working behind the counter. He goes, listen, honestly, he said, I really am kind of new here. And he said, you want me, I can try to get a hold of the owner or the manager, whomever, who told me that if you want. And so the journalist's like, yeah, if you don't mind doing so. And it was very cordial, very, polite interaction. And so the kid goes to the back, he comes back out, and he's like, yeah, he told me that the policy hadn't changed or something along those lines. And so, okay, we're right back to the independently owned hotel under the Hilton name that Hilton as a corporation said they fixed the problem, but they're like, no, we don't think so. So since that point, Hilton Corporate takes, quote, immediate action against hotel that barred DHS and ICE agents and essentially, I guess, booted them from the brand. The specific hotel in question was a Hampton Inn Lakeville property up in Minneapolis. After further investigation online, we have found information about immigration work connected to your name. We will be canceling your reservations. That, the background and so forth. The Hilton had released a subsequent statement saying the independent hotel owner had assured us that they had fixed the problem and published a message confirming this. A recent video clearly raises concerns that they are not meeting our standards and values. As such, we are taking immediate action to remove this hotel from our systems. Hilton is and has always been and remains a welcoming place for all. So all of that happened in pretty rapid succession from the initial posting online revealing what was going on, and then the back and forth to where by the end of yesterday, Hilton Corporate had said they're out. They're no longer able to use our brand. Now, what implications that'll actually have on the hotel itself, I'm not sure, but I don't think that anyone can criticize Hilton as a corporation for the way they handle that. Kudos to them, best I can tell. Coming up, CNN analyst Harry Enton reports American support putting former Venezuelan dictator Maduro on trial by a vast margin. We'll have that breakdown coming up in just moments. The Pyramid Roofing Company, talk and text line 447 KSGF.
Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First, meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see cloudy skies with a high near 68. Tonight, a 40% chance of showers throughout the night, otherwise mostly cloudy with a low around 52. For your Thursday, showers and possibly a thunderstorm with a high near 66. And taking a look at Friday, mostly sunny with a high near 59.
Yesterday, CNN Harry Enton's number analyst on the shifting perspective of Americans regarding the capture and upcoming trial of dictator Maduro.
This morning, we're getting some of our first polling about what Americans think about this operation in Venezuela against Maduro since it was completed. With us now, CNN chief data analyst Harry Enton. So what do voters say, and how has it changed over the last few days?
Yeah, it's been a dramatic change in a direction that I think the President of the United States will like, because what are we looking at here? Okay, U.S. military ousting Maduro. Pre-ousting, what you saw was the clear plurality of Americans opposed at 47%, just 21% support. Come over to this side of the screen. After the ousting, look at that. The support through the roof. Now we're talking about 37%, well within the margin of error right here of the opposition, 38%. It turns out Americans like what they deem to be successful foreign policy operations. And in this case, they view the ousting of Maduro, at least up to this point, as a successful one, and therefore the support way up.
Yeah, before underwater, now basically even. What about the idea of putting Maduro on trial here in the United States?
Yeah, you know, part of the reason why I think that the success number is way up, and you saw it here, what was it? It was 26 points in favor of opposition, and now within the margin of error, is because they simply don't like Nicolas Maduro. And in fact, they believe that he should be on trial for drug trafficking. Look at this, 50% of Americans favor compared to just 14% who oppose. So there are very few Americans here who oppose it. Even among Democrats, the opposition number is below, get this, just 24%, is below 25%. So this is something that unites Republicans. It divides Democrats. And at this particular point, support for the operation way up. And in terms of those who favor the drug trafficking trial for Maduro, that is a clear plurality.
It doesn't really even divide Democrats on the idea of a trial. They all seem to support it by and large. Only 24% oppose it for Democrats.
I do agree that, we talked about this earlier, oftentimes whether a decision was the right one, a move was the correct one, is based off of, did it work? And so sometimes you don't know. It is a gamble. The initial operation itself, clearly, the more we hear about it, the more Mission Impossible style operation it was. I don't know if you've Mission Impossible, obviously somewhat of an extreme example, but if you've ever watched any sort of movie or television show in which some sort of a heist or an operation is pulled off, and you're like, well, that's obviously very unrealistic. This is not a scenario that could realistically play out. That increasingly seems like exactly what this was. This was an operation that's just incredibly remarkable the way that it did play out successfully. Now, of course, there is the aftermath. And there's just a lot of that. You're talking about moving parts, and these decisions that are being asked to be determined now by the administration. What about this and that? Sometimes you don't know the answer to that until what happens today. That determines what happens tomorrow with certain decisions. Not all decisions, but with certain decisions. I do believe that there's other reasons that the shifting of support for this has occurred. One, people are learning. They're hearing from people who actually live in Venezuela or who lived in Venezuela. They are learning of the horror stories. They're hearing from real life people that are taking to the internet, audio of which we have played a great deal of, pushing back against the Democrat narrative that makes it appear as if Maduro, hey, listen, Mandani's, he's a socialist too, and Bernie Sanders, it's not that bad, and saying you all have no idea what's going on. They're seeing the celebrations in the street. They're seeing this level of jubilation, and that for a lot of people is new information. Like, oh, I didn't realize things were that bad down there. And we were able, you think about this move, just if things stay on the trajectory that they are, in a matter of hours, the lives of millions and millions of people were dramatically altered for the better because of one decision from one man, and that's Donald Trump. And they're brown people at that. Which, again, Donald Trump proving to be a horrible racist. Liberating millions and millions of brown people. And for many people who aren't tied to one political party or the other, they see that and they think, I don't really know how I can tell those people this is a bad thing. That's how some people will go from not really knowing to thinking, this was a good thing to happen. I mean, everyone's going to have their different perspective, but what is happening is a shift. And that shift, should things turn out really well, will in the end be one in which a majority of people will look back on it and say it was the right thing to do. I will tell you this, there is no way conceivable that it is going from this point to the point in which the dust has settled without some bad things happening. There will be bad things that happen. There will be decisions that are made that in retrospect turn out not to be the best one. Because you're going to have these Maduro folks there that are going to do whatever they can in order to prevent any good guys from taking over. Here, this is a good time to shift to this discussion about why on earth did Trump not support the Nobel Peace Prize winner? And it's being attributed to information from the CIA. While on one hand, I don't know that I trust the CIA to give the best analysis possible, but on the other hand, it really does almost make just common sense from the reports that are coming out as to why it is that they advised Trump to not out of the gate throw his support behind the opposition leader for the presidency. Now, just to clear up any sort of confusion, you and I, we've seen the Nobel Peace Prize winner, and she is referred to as the opposition leader, and so and you heard about the election that took place in which Maduro lost by like 30, 40 percentage points, but said, you know what, I don't care, I'm not leaving. And she fled, and she's in Europe or wherever she is now, and so she is the natural person to fill that slot, right? Well, she actually wasn't even on the ballot because she wasn't allowed to be. Maduro did to her what Democrats tried to do to Donald Trump and have him thrown off the ballot. Maduro just didn't have to worry about a Supreme Court that said you can't do that. So in her place ran someone else that was sort of an extension of her, a representation of her. So technically, if one were to say whomever actually legitimately won that election should be the president, it wouldn't even be her to begin with. And I just mention this because I know it can be confusing, talk about her being the opposition leader, but then you hear about this other guy who's this, and so that's what's going on there. Well, many people felt that Trump would immediately say, well, yeah, clearly she is the one who should become the president because she is the one that the people wanted. She wasn't allowed to be on the ballot. So in her place was this other person that was voted for, and so this should be the individual. She is an individual that also is a very big fan of Donald Trump, and she dedicated her Nobel Peace Prize to Donald Trump when she got it. when he came out and said, at least right now, temporarily, he was asked, he's like, I don't think she has this support. The media immediately jumped on the fact, what do you mean she doesn't have the support? She's the one who won the election. Well, technically, no, she did not. But he wasn't talking about the general public at large. He's talking about those that are making the government run and those who have guns in the government. And what he apparently had been advised by the CIA, which I don't think this takes any sort of real deep brain work to understand, is that at least while the dust is still in the air, you don't want a power vacuum. And you can't, one, look anyhow like, oh, this is a regime change. It's Donald Trump picking the next president, so it's this gal. But put someone in charge while you still have infrastructure that is Maduro infrastructure. Because that would be a recipe for disaster. And I mean, that makes sense to me. So what do you do in the meantime? You've got to do something. You have to keep things as stable as possible until you can start making some of these big moves, big decisions, and you've got to get some stability while the dust settles, and then you can start doing some reconstruction again. And so that means this vice president, which is a bad chick. Some say she's even worse than Maduro. For the time being, keep her in there as a temporary hold until we can get some sense of stability in place. The dust settles, and then, come what may next after that, be it calling for elections, which their, quote, constitution, I believe, calls for elections 30 days or 60 days, 90 days. There's a period of time in which they are supposed to hold elections in the, like, if the president, even though the vice president, like, moves up, but the president is gone, there's supposed to be a special election. But what his people are arguing is that, well, he's just been kidnapped. He's not, like, gone. He'll be back. And so that clock hasn't started yet, so there's some debate over that. But the reason at this point, and I say according to the reports and the CIA advice to Donald Trump, but all of this makes sense to me. This is a temporary hold, holding things in place while you're sort of getting other sustainable structure, and you just got to let that dust settle. And let the emotions die down just a little bit, and utilize, the power of Donald Trump and what just happened to get this vice president under control, who's just as bad as Maduro, and make sure she remembers what her fate could be if she doesn't, in the meantime, do what it is that we expect her to do. And it is, day to day on a lot of this stuff. So that's, there's a lot of, some journalists and anti-Trump people are, well, he just decided that he didn't want that Nobel Peace Prize winner to be in there because she won it instead of him. That's just absolute, complete nonsense. It is Trump derangement syndrome and an inability to recognize the reality of what's really going on. This is another difference between Donald Trump and what we're accustomed to in terms of leadership. We have been accustomed to oftentimes going into these situations and then just sort of, go in and make a move that causes a massive disruption, and then almost just like not recognizing how people will behave and trying to mitigate that ahead of time, trying to steer that a certain direction, but instead just waiting to see what happens, or just saying this is how it's going to be without any sort of recognition of how that's going to play out. And Trump understands people's behavior. Trump understands this is what makes Trump successful in areas that others are not. He may not sit around reading books all the time. He has street smarts. He understands what motivates people. This is how he operates. And when you are talking about a scenario, as we're dealing with now in Venezuela, you cannot have a better person in charge than someone who understands what motivates other people. And I know it sounds redundant because it is. I keep saying it doesn't mean every decision is going to be correct and right and so forth, but you can't have a person in charge with better tools than the tools that Donald Trump has when it comes to a scenario like this. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. Nick, I'm willing to bet that in 4 years, people in New York City will be less free than people in Venezuela. That is a legitimate perspective. Prior to this alteration of the landscape in Venezuela, I tell you what I legitimately would have loved to have seen. And only Trump could have at least seriously proposed this. And I would have fully supported it, and that would have been a citizen swap. Totally voluntarily. All of these Democrats, any Democrat who believes socialism is the answer, a citizenship swap with one person in Venezuela who wants to escape socialism. In fact, you could even say those who made it here illegally swap citizenship for them, those that are already here. But if you didn't want to do that, you want to say, no, you got to go back. If you want to be part of this program, go back to Venezuela and put in your application and do the swap. So you get these liberals, mostly women, who think that socialism is the most wonderful thing in the world. Here's your opportunity. Free flight. Go live the wonders of socialism. I mean, you don't need, right? Like, whoa, how am I going to pay for this or that? It's socialism. You don't have to worry about that stuff. That's the brilliance of socialism, right? If you don't have anything, you're taken care of. Free housing, free childcare, free food, free medical for all. So you don't need any sort of financial assistance beyond just the ticket there. And I would gladly support a program that would swap for every left-wing Democrat activist who believes socialism is the answer with someone in Venezuela who said we want out of socialism, who understands the realities of socialism, and bring them here automatic citizenship to the United States of America. 100% I would support that. 100%. One of the, to the point of the text message noting Mamdani and the people of New York selecting their Maduro, Democratic Socialist, is that they really truly will not feel the ultimate true impacts of socialism because of our form of government. They will have so much of the sting of socialism taken out because of our capitalistic system that will bail them out. See, you look at what's happened in Venezuela, that's not an option because all of Venezuela is socialist. So it's not like, okay, well, this city has a socialist leader, but the country is run by non-socialist individuals, and so the entire country is not affected or infected, and they don't have that. It is true socialism, unaided or unsubsidized by a non-socialism system. So that's why you hear so many people talk about and recognize they learned the lesson the hard way. 20, 30 years ago, they got sucked into believing socialism was wonderful and good, and this is why 8 million of them have fled. Cuba, they're more trapped there because they're surrounded by water, and many of them have fled, tried to flee, die fleeing, and so forth. But this is why, if in the Soviet Union fell, I mean, you just go example after example. Unfortunately, the people of New York won't really truly have to deal with the ultimate consequences of their decision because they'll be relying on the rest of us to bail them out. Federal tax dollars, state tax dollars from New York. See, Mamdani's not in a vacuum, and he knows it. He's going to rely on getting federal tax dollars and state tax dollars that exist because of a non-socialist system. And it's also part of the reason that in this country, so many people are ignorant as to the true negative anti-humanitarian impact of socialist policies because they've never drowned in it. And they can elect a mayor who is a socialist in New York City, and it won't get as bad as Venezuela because there are the rest of us that they're going to be sucking off of in order to get the programs that they want. There is a revenue source. It's all the rest of us. Latest traffic update. I'm Nick Reed. I think that there really is an idea that we should explore, and it's a citizen swap. We could do it for countries like Cuba, and that is any young Democrat, socialist, and just swap them with anyone from Cuba, for example, who wants to escape socialism, citizenship swap, and just one for one. I'm 100% behind a program like that. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed at first of the year. The weather's still nice. It's just perfect weather to do a test drive. You know, a lot of times you test drive a vehicle in the winter and there's sleet and there's ice and snow on the ground, and you're like, I wonder what this will feel like with the windows down and the radio on, and I guess I'll just have to gamble on it, assume it's going to be wonderful. You can do that now. Pinnaker Honda, of course, still all sorts of incredible deals going into 2026. Pre-owned vehicles, incentives on new vehicles, and then they have that Pinnaker Advantage. One of the upsides of being part of that Pinnaker family, purchasing your vehicle there, which makes you a family member, is then you get preferential treatment in terms of pricing on routine maintenance for the life of the vehicle. And so it's just one of the many perks. And they're just great folks over there. Of course, they've got a number of different locations. My truck I purchased at the Pinnaker location in Republic. I don't know, 3-4 years ago now at this point. And so they're great folks, and it's one of the reasons that, I partner up with them and tell you about them. And then, of course, that fantastic location and just the line of vehicles from Honda makes Pinnaker Honda a fantastic place to check out. And it's first of the year. Test drive a car. Weather's going to be great for it today. South Campbell, just south of Walnut Lawn. NASCAR Commissioner Steve Phelps yesterday announced his resignation after more than 20 years with the top racing series in the United States and a nasty federal trial in which inflammatory texts he sent during contentious revenue-sharing negotiations were revealed. Maybe ask, why am I sharing this story? Well, there's a local twist to it, so I just found it interesting, thought I'd share. From the New York Post, Phelps, the commissioner of more than 20 years, will leave the company at the end of the month. Ahead of the start of the season, he was named NASCAR's first commissioner last season after a courting process for the same role by the PGA Golf Tour. The opportunity with the PGA was revealed during December. Testimony of the antitrust trial brought by two race teams against NASCAR. But the top executive at NASCAR was deeply bruised during the trial and the discovery process leading into it, when communications he exchanged with top leadership was exposed. In one exchange, Phelps called Hall of Fame team owner Richard Childress, quote, a stupid redneck who needs to be taken out back and flogged. Well, guess who is a ardent supporter, as described in the New York Post, of both NASCAR and Richard Childress? Johnny Morris. According to the New York Post, Phelps calling Childress a stupid redneck who needs to be taken out and flogged resulted in Bass Pro Shop founder Johnny Morris writing a letter demanding Phelps' removal as commissioner. NASCAR settled the lawsuit with 23XI Racing. I don't know if that's what it's called. I'm not familiar with racing. Owned by Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin, and Front Row Motorsports, owned by Bob Jenkins, the day after Morris wrote the letter. Phelps said in a statement, as a lifelong race fan, it gives me immense pride to have served as NASCAR's first commissioner and to lead our great sport through so many incredible challenges, opportunities, and first of my 20 years our sport is built on the passion of our fans, the dedication of our teams and partners, and the commitment of our wonderful employees. I just thought it was an interesting story to share. Now that's power. You call somebody in private text messages that come out. It's kind of bad, I guess. A redneck that needs to be flawed. Johnny Morris is your friend. He doesn't like that. It's good to have the right friends. That seems to be the case for sure. I'm not even sure. I guess redneck is an insult. I don't even know.
I guess.
Well, it's context. Following it up with who needs to be flogged suggests that redneck in that context was not a compliment. Latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see cloudy skies with a high near 68. Tonight, a 40% chance of showers throughout the night, otherwise mostly cloudy with a low around 52. For your Thursday, showers and possibly a thunderstorm with a high near 66. And taking a look at Friday, mostly sunny with a high near 59.
I want a great homeloan.com. Eric Burleson there talking about his folks buying breakfast for you at Scramblers this Friday. If you have a bumper sticker on your car, if you don't have one, they'll get you one. And I think I believe that one of the characters will be joining us this Friday, as they often do, usually every other Friday or so, and they're there because they are what I would consider non-traditional in their approach to dealing with folks who might need a refinance or a home loan or a reverse mortgage, and that is they make themselves available, even if you're not ready, even if you're not their client, even if you're not, like at that point where, they know, okay, we got you. You're going to start making me some money here because I'm going to get commission or whatever off. That's just not how they operate. They are informational. They're there in order to answer your questions, to be a resource for you. And then when the time, and if the time comes that you want to utilize their services for any of those needs, they're there for you. I recommend them. Go to number one. But let me tell you this. If you're like, well, I always go to my traditional and they take good care of me, second look never hurts. Never hurts. And you know what? If you find out after having a second look with them or having them go over your information to see what sort of different home loans and deals that they can work out for you, and you're like, you know what, I'm still comfortable with my traditional route of going, then hey, there you go. There you know it. But here's a news flash for you. Not every place that you go is going to find for you the exact same deals and offers. I think there's this misunderstanding that it doesn't matter where you go, you're going to get the exact same thing because, well, interest rates are what they are and my credit is what it is, and so there really aren't going to be any different options. That is not true. So if they're not your first choice, have them take a second crack at it. I want a great homeloan.com because you do. Jim Jordan was on with Casey Hunt on CNN, and in fact, I'll just play the audio for you because there's a couple of points I want to make on this, and they're talking about the issue of Venezuela and America first, and how all of this meshes out.
Results. We trust him. I trust him, and we'll see how this plays out over the next 60 days.
Is the president prioritizing foreign concerns over the concerns of Americans here at home?
No, he's had an amazing year. And I think this next year will be amazing.
Where
as
should
well.
Venezuela go on the priority list? Like, what should the president be
just
worried
run
about
down the
first
list.
and foremost?
Casey, run down the list. The president. I always say we make this job too complicated. What did we tell the voters we were going to do when we got elected? If you get elected, go do what you said. No one does it better than President Trump. He said he'd cut taxes. He did. He said he'd secure the border. He did. He said he'd get men out of women's sports. He did. He said he'd make sure Iran didn't get nuclear capability. He did. He said he would do things in the best interest of the country. As I pointed out, taking out Maduro, bringing him to justice is in the best interest of the United States, of the families I get the privilege of representing in the 4th District of Ohio, and frankly, Americans all across our
Is it
great
in the
country.
best interests of the United States to have America running Venezuela?
I think it's in the best interest of the United States holding someone to justice who we didn't recognize as the head of state, who runs a narco-terrorist organization, who was cozying up and playing footsie with
But
Iran.
I'm not asking you about that. I understand where you are on the operation itself, the removal of Maduro. But what I don't understand is, the president keeps saying we're going to run it. He says that if this new person that they've installed, who is Maduro's number 2, it's not like they're getting rid of the entire regime here, right? It's not the opposition leader that's coming in.
I think we'll see how that shakes out.
And you're comfortable, like, you don't have any concerns about that at all?
Well, they're going to brief certain members of Congress, I think, later today. I assume all members of Congress will get briefed at some point in the near future. I trust the leadership of President Trump. I think his track record is unbelievable. So let's allow that to play out. The way the War Powers Resolution works is 60 days that they can do that. I think he's completely within his authority under that. And as I said, constitutionally and historically as well.
Right, now, I want to give an answer to that question. And this is it's a question that is designed in order to either get Republicans to say things that make it appear as if they're acknowledging that we are taking over Venezuela, or put them in a position to where it sounds as if they are in opposition to what Donald Trump is doing, and that is asking the question, do you think we should be running Venezuela? This is based off the position that Donald Trump has put forth that, hey, right now we're running things. And is that really is that a good idea? Is that in our best interest? And here's the answer to that. Given the decision, and when I say this is the answer to it, I don't mean this is the answer he should have given. I'm just telling you this is the answer. Given the decision by the Trump administration to go ahead and enforce the indictment that came down during the Biden years and hold Maduro accountable, it is in the best interest of the United States to make sure that there is not a power vacuum that results in chaos in that country. And so we're doing the responsible thing while enforcing our laws and holding an individual who is an international criminal who's been indicted in the United States, holding that individual accountable. We're going to go ahead and take responsibility for and recognize what that means to that country and not let it go straight to hell and spiral. And if that means plug in a vacuum and coordinating things and running the show until that will stabilize things to the point that they are going to be back on their feet, then that's what we're going to do. I mean, that's the real answer, given the decision to hold Maduro accountable. There's two other things that I want to mention here because we hear this nation-building thing. And I suppose everyone is going to have their own definition of nation building. Trump's against nation building. Why is he doing this? And you hear this isn't nation building. I, too, agree this is not nation building. Nation building, and this is just, I'll give you my perspective of it, that I believe is in line with reality. I believe a person could look at what we were attempting to do in Iraq as nation building, and that is you topple Saddam Hussein, and then almost starting from a blank slate of sorts, and looking to hit the complete reset button in terms of, just the whole country to where it looks like something totally different. Venezuela, it's more like if you have a liquor store and got a liquor store owner and liquor store employees, and one day a gang member comes in and holds everyone hostage, locks them in the cooler, and starts running things. When law enforcement comes in and captures that individual, that's not like building a liquor store. That's correcting a wrong. That is enforcing a law. And this isn't a desire to take a country and turn it into something new. It's to take, this is the desired outcome, to take Venezuela and just let it go back to the way it was before the dictator took over. And then let the people of Venezuela choose whomever they want. If they want to choose another socialist, so be it. To me, that is a much different thing, particularly given the fact that Maduro is just a narco-terrorist who wasn't the president. This was a guy who overwhelmingly lost by everyone's recognition, but just up and said, no, I think I'll be president anyhow. And everyone's like, you can't do that. And he's like, oh, really? And the people who said you can't do that began truly disappearing and being tortured and being killed and being thrown in prison. While some may still argue that doesn't mean we should involve ourselves, that whole scenario is not a nation-building thing. When it comes to the discussion of America first, how is this America first? Why is it we are prioritizing another country over America? This is a judgment call. Let me tell you first what I reject. I reject the notion that simply because an effort happens outside of our geographic borders, that means that it is not beneficial to America. That means it is automatically not America first, because America first is defined by geography, and if it is happening right here if the action or focus happens right here in America, I reject the idea that that is what defines America first. If that were the case, then we would have no interest whatsoever in making sure we have any sort of, defense system in space. Because, well, you can say, well, of course that's because it's about protecting America. Well, the judgment of the Trump administration is ultimately this is about what is best for America. Whether it is the immediate fact that under the direction of the narco-terrorist Maduro, he literally had gangs operational gangs in the United States, Trans de Aragua, that were, among other things, taking over in complete apartment complexes, holding people hostages, making sure everyone knew if you called police in order to make the point you don't do that, cutting off your dialing finger. Then the amount of drugs coming into the United States. And some people are like, well, it's only cocaine. Well, with fentanyl in it. But still, point being, in a real-time scenario, if you stop that from occurring, many people would argue that is a plus for the country. To no longer have America... on one hand, Trump, a lot of people recognized and were outraged that here in our country, we were allowing these gangs during the Biden administration to control these apartment complexes. Aurora, Colorado was a big one, but the Trans-Nicaragua gangs had footprint all over the country. And we were rightfully so outraged. How can we let this happen? Well, You cut the head off the snake is one way to do it, and that is the perspective of the Trump administration. That, yeah, cutting the head off the snake of the operation that is allowing all that is facilitating that to happen is in America's interest. The fact that you have our enemies, Russia, China, Iran, setting up shop, including military assets in our hemisphere, using Venezuela to do it, and changing that so that they no longer, pushing them out of our hemisphere in that capacity. The Trump administration's judgment is that is good for the United States. That is a national security issue. Because we can't just look at national security in terms of, what is happening right now, but what the plan is by our enemies 10 years from now. Bill Clinton was greatly criticized because he was offered bin Laden. Bin Laden hopscotching through the Middle East. A number of countries didn't want him. Called the Clinton administration, said, you want him? Here's where he is. You can arrest him. But the Clinton administration's position was, well, he hadn't really done anything to us yet, so that's not really our business. That turned out to be not a very wise decision. 9/11 occurred because we decided not to do it. That was a judgment call. He could have been right. I mean, he wasn't, but there's a world in which maybe bin Laden didn't do that. But unfortunately for all of the Americans who lost their lives, that judgment was wrong. That was a decision that Bill Clinton had to make. Is it in the interest of the United States to go into some foreign country and capture this terrorist and bring him back here to the United States? The judgment call was no. We don't need to worry about him. That's not in our interest. That was a wrong call. We have been conditioned because of poor decision making when it comes to our involvement in other countries in particular. We have been conditioned to believe that it's never in our interest to get involved, particularly militarily, or to tinker around the world in other countries. And and that's a fair conditioning. I mean, we've been conditioned that way. Like I said, because a lot of really, you look back and you're like, well, probably shouldn't have gotten involved in that. What was the upside of that? Was no upside with that. And so because of that, we begin to equate any action outside our borders as not being in our interest. But what we're doing is we are saddling Trump in our expectations. We're saddling him because of the sins of past presidents. And while, like I said, that doesn't mean a person has to necessarily think this was the exact right decision to make. I just reject, for me, this notion that it automatically is not in the best interest of the United States of America if it is action taken outside of our borders. And I understand we think that oftentimes because so often that has been the way that it's played out. But Trump isn't perfect, but he also isn't all those past presidents. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see cloudy skies with a high near 68. Tonight, a 40% chance of showers throughout the night, otherwise mostly cloudy with a low around 52. For your Thursday, showers and possibly a thunderstorm with a high near 66. And taking a look at Friday, mostly sunny with a high near 59. And Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air, whether you are looking for a company to handle your seasonal maintenance or you are ready for a new energy efficient unit to install, the Foreman team, they have got you covered for all of your HVAC needs. Just a top-notch company. I couldn't recommend them enough. I've used the Foreman team multiple times out at the Fixer Upper Farmhouse, and they've always been punctual, upfront, and affordable. In fact, the last time that I had them out, I finally had them install new heating and cooling systems, which was a pretty big deal because our units were 28 years old. That is impressive, but they were struggling to keep up. The Foreman team, they took great care of my home, and they were in and out within about a day and a half. Just great folks, and that is why I love to partner with them. If it's time to have the Foreman team out to your home, reach out to Russell and schedule your appointment today. You can find all of the contact information for Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. Has anyone talked about the Iran protests? They're taking over the country. No one's covering it. Please look into this. So we have talked about it just a bit in a couple of different capacities. One when Trump, last Friday, in fact, talked about the fact that Trump had posted on social media a remark saying, or essentially warning the Iranian regime not to kill any of the protesters, saying that we were locked and loaded and ready to go if, in fact, that did happen. Now, these are protests that, what a difference a president makes. So during the Obama years, of course, they were financially propping up the Iranians, and then Trump came along, put the screws to him. Biden got in office, and once again, just really began financially, so funneling money, lifting sanctions, making it possible for them to fund Hamas. The Biden administration is ultimately responsible for funding the October 7th attacks on Israel because Iran was, during the Trump years, just becoming financially instability is what they were dealing with. Now, you may recall during that same period of time, we would later learn John Kerry was back-channeling to the Iranians, telling them just wait until Trump gets out of there and, your allies will be back in the White House. And Biden delivered on that. Well, Trump got back in there, and we've seen what has happened. Took out all of their nuclear capabilities and has put these screws to them and isolated them from the rest of the Middle East to the point that their economy is collapsing. They're having issues as basic as delivering water to people, in which there have been talks about having just to move major cities even because things are falling apart so drastically. And so protests in a meaningful way began occurring, and a lot of the actual physical protests were coming from people because of economic reasons, market owners, and the response, in fact, in the last couple of days to that has been the Iranians, the government, promising $7 a month to certain categories of people in order to try and take a little steam out of those who are protesting for economic reasons. But the problem that they have, you've got students involved now, and you have protesters that are being killed. And one of the things we talked about last week was, Trump oftentimes, when he's tweeting things out, the interpretation is he's just doing it randomly, like he's watching TV and he sees these Iranian protests and he's like, hey, don't you touch them. We'll be locked and loaded and ready to go if you're suggesting military interaction. And while oftentimes I do believe he does send out tweets that he doesn't necessarily have a lot of depth to, I believe that one was a recognition that our information indicates Iran really truly is on the brink of collapse, the dictatorial regime. And he wanted to keep the momentum of the protesters going by giving them the sense of we got your back. And in fact, this story, Fox News from earlier today, Iran on the brink as protesters moved to take over 2 cities. And there's among others, a picture that was shared on X showed a woman holding up a sign with the words, "Trump, a symbol of peace, don't let them kill us." And you have increasingly Iranian protesters that are issuing a direct appeal to Trump to help them. The woman's cry for help in that particular posting came amid reports of at least 29 deaths, more than 1,200 arrests, according to human rights activist news agencies. Escalation enforced by security units, including the use of pellet guns, tear gas, direct assaults on demonstrators. The National Council of Resistance of Iran, known as the NCRI, also claimed the cities of Abdanan and Malak-Shahi were effectively taken over by protesters. Al-Safahi told Fox News Digital today there was a major development in 2 cities in western Iran that have been effectively taken over, and people are actually celebrating in the streets. They were chanting, not death to America, death to Khomeini. Saying despite everything the regime has done, the fear factor seems to have shifted because people have made the suppressive forces flee. Miriam Rajavi, NCRI president-elect, also shared a post on X saluting the protesters who, she said, drove the regime's enforcers into retreat. Demonstrations, strikes, and street gatherings have also been reported across dozens of cities in multiple provinces. In one of the provinces, witnesses and rights groups reported that tear gas was fired inside the Imam Khomeini Hospital as authorities attempted to arrest wounded protesters transferred from nearby towns. Amnesty International said yesterday the Iranian security forces attacked a hospital where injured protesters are seeking medical care and shelter, which is a violation of international law. Similar accounts emerging from Tehran, where security forces were reportedly seen entering Sinai Hospital, prompting fear among patients and families. And, this is something that is continuing to escalate. And as I mentioned before and talked about on Friday, I believe the reason that Trump sent out that tweet was to keep this momentum going because there was intelligence information or just even arguably casual observances noticing that this could really truly be the brink of the Iranian people overthrowing the regime. Of course, what happens then? I think there's an argument to be made that given the historical stability in the Middle East due to the Abraham Accords and the massive inroads the Trump administration, Donald Trump specifically, has made in terms of the mind shift, culturally speaking, of so many of those Middle Eastern countries, there probably has not been a better time for something like this to happen in the context of what will occur in a vacuum. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but given the advantages so many of these Middle Eastern countries are recognizing comes along with stability and peace in the Middle East, there may be today more than ever the influence of those countries to recognize it is in their best interest for whomever ends up taking over in Iran, should there be a regime change, to be someone that wants to be a peaceful partner. And if that is the case, you just think about the implications of all the things that Trump has done. The possibility that Iran could go back to the way it was in the 70s. A hip, cool place. Women walking around college campuses wearing shorts and T-shirts. To have that sort of massive fundamental change occur without any sort of outside military intervention. And if that is to be the case, I would again argue it exists because of the overall that particular outcome. The overall stability in the Middle East that is due to Donald Trump. I believe we are on a trajectory in which potentially, and some would argue it's already happened, well beyond our great-great-grandchildren, hundreds and hundreds of years from now. Donald Trump is a name that will be known worldwide because of the massive international historic alterations that took place due to his decisions to act in a way that no one else would. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor. You know, we were going into winter, and I was talking about preparing for spring, planning out ahead of time for your outdoor projects. And I listen, it's only January. We got February, you got March, and one of the biggest snows I remember over the past decade happened in March, if memory serves correctly. So, you know, winter is still there to come. But, and in fact, yesterday, my wife and I were sat outside on that Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor patio, sitting around the fire pit. We didn't even have that fire going. It was too warm outside. And today is going to essentially be a repeat of yesterday. But these are premier folks. These are not the folks that if you just want a real quick job done, that'll last, it'll last 10 years and before you have to have any maintenance done on it, and you want the job done in a couple of weeks. But if you're wanting it to be done in a way that is going to last beyond you and your kids, and you want it done right by the experts with quality product that's not available to the general public, then you want Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor. And by the way, it doesn't have to be. I talk so much about what I have had them do so far with our outdoor project in that living space they created. They do tremendous landscaping. They can do lighting for your home, whether it is the uplighting for trees, the home itself, to have all of it. It's incredible in terms of addition to the aesthetics of a home. I don't think there is anything you can do for the price of lighting that changes the overall aesthetics of a home in the evening like lighting does. It's an amazing difference. Once we had it done, I will never not do it. If we ever buy another house, it's going to be one of the first things that we have done. But point being is they have a lot of different services and drainage stuff as well. They can take care of you. You can visit their site, see much of what they do, many of their projects, reviews as well. HunterHardscapes.com. You can also find them under Nick's endorsements at KSGF.com. A couple of bits of information Sarah handed me. One, we were talking about what's going on in Iran and the a number of cities that, according to reports, have fallen to the protesters, and now many protesters taking to social media, holding up signs, asking Trump for help, save us, Trump, don't let them, kill us. The head of Iran's military threatened preemptive action over rhetoric targeting the country as the regime is dealing with these massive protests, and much of that's in response to Trump essentially warning through social media the Iranians not to kill off protesters, saying if so, we're ready to defend them lock and loaded. Now, you should never dismiss a threat out of hand. But at the same time, I mean, the Iranian military threatening preempt, like I said, okay, you don't want to completely dismiss it, but... And reports U.S. forces are attempting to board the Russian-flagged Marinera oil tanker, or Marinera. It is spelled Marinera. I'm not sure if there's a Russian twist to the pronunciation, but nonetheless, it's an oil tanker in the North Atlantic Sea. The news, first reported by Reuters, comes after the Wall Street Journal reported yesterday that Russia had sent a submarine and other naval assets to escort the tanker. The vessel, previously operating under the name Bella 1, has spent more than 2 weeks attempting to slip past U.S. enforcement efforts targeting sanctioned oil shipments near Venezuela. So some of the latest breaking news there. Okay, let's see. Oh, here is an update. Sunshine, the bridge there that's been closed forever and a day.
Yes.
Which you don't deal with it as much as some because of
No, yeah, I
which
head north.
I don't really actually either because of the way that I head out. But every so often, if you're coming in or just sunshine and you're like, oh my gosh, that bridge is still closed because
you gotta go around.
forever and a day ago it was supposed to be open. Well, so MoDOT, according to KY3, has said that it should be open by Friday.
Oh.
Yes. So initially, it was scheduled to be finished December, but then pushed back to January. And so MoDOT right now says it's going to be open by Friday. Now, that isn't nearly as delayed as oftentimes it seems as if these projects are. And by the way, this isn't just a government thing. Sometimes private industry as well, like, oh, we're going to be open on this date, and then it turns out to be much later, though almost always the reason for it to be open later is because of government with permits or, contractors, but the contractors dealing with permits, and so you just rarely, I'm trying to think, I don't know that anything stands out necessarily as a long-term project in which they're like, hey, this is going to be open in November of 20 whatever, and then, oh my gosh, it actually opened. And for the life of me, I don't understand why. Whenever a prediction internally is like, how long is this going to take? We think it will be done December of 2025. Why not just add time to that?
That's a good idea.
I mean, really, whatever the period of time is, add 20% more time onto it and say that's when it's going to be done. Because in all likelihood, it will be that far out. And if you do get it done earlier than that, then you can present yourself, look, we got it done early. How often does that have impact?
And everybody's happy.
And I know people who are experts in this area, they're probably saying, well, you don't understand. I mean, yes, but then things happen. And to which I'm saying, yes, no, I think I do understand things happen. But it seems as if the people who make these timeline predictions don't understand things happen, or they don't understand how many of these things happen, because it's just always much longer. Though this one, a month and a half, 2 months, that isn't too terribly longer, unless you're one of the business owners that's affected, of course. But I've just always thought that because it's so consistent, and why it is that you just can't look at, there's got to be some sort of formula. You look back over a period of time. What is the average percentage longer that it actually takes to finish a project than we predict? And then let's just take that as a formula. And if over a 10-year period of time, it on average takes 20% longer, then I would, it's going to take this many days, add 20% to it, and then be like, this is our new predicted time. And then you know what? Just go ahead and add another month or two on top of that as well. I know that just seems like a crazily overly simplistic way to do it, but all I know is that it's virtually never, ever, ever on time. But 2 months, it's not too awful bad. In the next hour, the commemorative event Democrats held for January 6th yesterday.
It was quite the display.
Oh, yes, quite the display. That coming up. Ozarks elder law. Lori Rook, ladies in white, can do the heavy lifting for your New Year's resolution, which actually is a lifelong resolution that takes very little effort on your part, and that is making sure that you are taken care of when the unexpected and sometimes expected occur, like death in the family, nursing home stays. Do you know there are 5 different ways that you can cover the cost of nursing home for you or your loved one, but each and every one of those ways sort of starts to drop off the closer the time gets, which means the earlier you plan, the more options in all likelihood you will have. Do you know even being married doesn't mean ultimately you have the legal authority to make medical decisions for your spouse? That stuff has to be taken care of and in writing. Now, states vary. So what may be recognized in one state isn't in another, which is all the more reason that even if you've done a will, you've done any sort of power of attorney stuff, but you did it while living in another state, you need to have them take a look at it. And the consultation doesn't cost you anything. You may think to yourself, I don't know if I even need to do anything. That's right, you don't know. They do. And to find out what you need to have done in order to protect yourself and your family, your loved ones, consultation is absolutely a courtesy. They cover the cost for you. 10 area locations. And then they tell you up front, here's what it'll cost to get these things done, and then you can make that decision for yourself. OzarksElderLaw.com. You can also find the information under Nick's endorsements at KSGF.com. I've got to tell you, this is just my emotional reaction from an intellectual perspective. I am less impacted and affected by anything that the media has said yesterday about January 6th than I think I ever have been. You know, like in the beginning, they do and it's frustrating, it's aggravating to watch, and you see how they are editing things and using selective information in order to create a false narrative, and it makes you angry, it makes you mad. And I think, honestly, for the very first year of the media and the Democrats trying to capitalize off of the events on January 6th by mischaracterizing what occurred, I could not have cared any less other than laughing at the Democrats' display at their candlelight vigil they held.
I mean, what a joke, right?
They are so just bad.
Who are they holding it for?
I mean, I don't know. Ashley Babbitt's the only one who died, and she was a Trump supporter that was executed by one of Nancy Pelosi's Capitol Hill police officers. She wasn't even armed. Apparently, it is okay to shoot an unarmed person in this country. You just have to be a Trump supporter. I suspect the candlelight vigil was not for her. If you did not see it, it's using the term cringe to me is almost cringe, but sometimes you have to use the term. It just makes you cringe. The visuals of it is the Democrats with candles, lit candles. I wonder if they were actual candles or like the battery operated ones. I don't
That's a
know.
good question.
Yeah, probably the battery operated ones, but either which way, if they were smart, that's what they would have done. And here they come down the steps of the Capitol. Oh, and they're all so somber. And together they sing God Bless America, which most of them don't really believe anyhow, which is kind of funny that they would choose that song instead of We Shall Overcome, or I don't know, whatever they would normally sing. But it's just so bad. And then afterwards, they're just sort of silent. It's bad. The only thing about it that I guess here's the part that makes me laugh is that they think that somehow This is moving and impactful, and that Americans are going to see it and remember, that's right, I forgot. Donald Trump tried to overthrow the country. Yeah.
Did you see that their live stream cut off like mid-song?
No.
Yeah. Their old live stream.
And they're all so old.
Yeah, I was a little nervous while they were going down the stairs. I thought, boy, howdy. Those are real candles, and they're not doing handrails.
I had the same thought, and I bet
We might
a lot
witness
of other people
something.
did. I thought if just the one person in front fell, and you just see the
would all
cascading
explode.
domino effect of broken bones and moaning, and I mean that would have just you don't wish ill will on anyone, but it would have been funny to watch, especially if they were real candles and the hot wax. You know, they're throwing the hot wax as they're tripping over one another, and then the screams and the yells. And did you see the meme that JD Vance put out?
I don't think so.
It's a snapshot.
I'll have to look.
It's a snapshot of somewhat of a zoomed in close up of Chuck Schumer and a few of the others at the candlelight vigil, but they all have sombreros on. They're wearing sombreros. Oh boy. Yeah. Well, if you want to watch it, we'll get it posted. It's just so. Some of these postings, Dan O'Donnell posted, I can't stop laughing at the Dems holding a effing candlelight vigil to mark the 5th anniversary of January 6th. This really is their high holy day. I'm trying to see if there's anything else really funny here in terms of comments. You don't have to rely on the comments being humorous for something like that, just because it's all so bad. But genuinely, when I saw the coverage, we're doing the show yesterday in CNN, and along the bottom something about January 6th, and I didn't even get even slightly annoyed. And, here's the reason why. When media is dishonest, a large part of the reason that I have an adverse emotional reaction is because I recognize that there are some people who will believe it. And that's the part that makes me upset. Because I'm like, people are going to believe that. I don't think that there isn't a normal person who really cares about January 6th any longer in a way that affects their vote. I mean, there's no one that is going to be like, oh, I forgot about that. I'm going to quit supporting what Donald Trump's doing for this country. It's no one. And in fact, I think what it does occur is these people that aren't dedicated to one party or another, they see that and they're like, are you seriously going back to this again? Really? I mean, January 6th? Well, it makes sense to have a candlelight vigil. It was worse than 9/11, according to Democrats. Now, I do, after the news, have an interesting update on Michael Byrd. Michael Byrd is the Capitol Hill police officer that, under Nancy Pelosi, murdered Ashley Babbitt inside the Capitol. Got a nice little update from Gateway Pundit on him that I'd like to share right now. The latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First, meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see cloudy skies with a high near 68. Tonight, a 40% chance of showers throughout the night, otherwise mostly cloudy with a low around 52. For your Thursday, showers and possibly a thunderstorm with a high near 66. And taking a look at Friday, mostly sunny with a high near 59.
Someone texted in that the Democrats that had the candlelight vigil for January 6th on the Capitol steps could not have used real candles because it would have endangered lighting their hair on fire due to all of the old lady hairspray.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. And the hair, it kind of gets, I don't know what you know what, where it seems like it's fluffed out a little bit. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when you get, years ago, I was a server at a place called Artie's Villa in Reddings Mill, Missouri, which is just south of Joplin, and it's considered Joplin. And there was a gal who worked there, and she was retirement age, but she had that sort of hair. And she was doing, isn't it Bananas Foster? You could get a Bananas Foster table side where I think that's one that they light on fire. It was some dessert, and she had that sort of hair. It caught her head on fire. Yeah. Some of the whomever it was that was at that table put it out. She didn't even realize it at first, and she was very confused when they started hitting her in the head with napkins for a brief moment. She was okay, but that stuff will go up pretty quickly. So I imagine that there is probably some truth to that. Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you. The Pyramid Roofing Company. Winter is still a great time to do a roof repair or replacement. In fact, it's one of the best seasons. You can experience a shorter turnaround time, and you can even snag yourself a discount. So if you've been mulling over, should I do a roof repair now or just wait until spring, just reach out to Josh. They do free roof inspections, so you're not out anything if you have them come out, and you can get an idea of how your roof is holding up. And he doesn't do a sales pitch or use scare tactics to force you into anything. They're just good, honest people who want to help you keep your house protected protected from the elements. So if it's time to get a checkup on your roof, reach out to Josh today. You can find all of the contact information for the Pyramid Roofing Company under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
We mentioned in the previous segment yesterday, elected Democrats held a candlelight vigil on the steps of the Capitol in honor of January 6th, though it apparently was not for Ashley Babbitt, the only person to actually be killed in the Capitol on January 6th at the hands of one of Nancy Pelosi's Capitol Hill police officers. Ashley Babbitt was not armed, and she wasn't close to where she could do any harm to Michael Byrd, that particular officer. He just opened fire. Now, some people argue that he did it on accident. Though, whether it was an accident or he just decided to execute her, was celebrated by the Democrats, and in fact, given a preemptive pardon by Joe Biden, because you murder a supporter of your political opposition and you get rewarded for it if you're a Democrat anyhow. But there's an update on the executioner of Ashley Babbitt, Gateway Pundit. Michael Byrd, who shot Ashley Babbitt down on January 6th in cold blood, runs an unaccredited daycare center in Maryland at his home and has pocketed $190 million in taxpayer funds. $190 million for an unaccredited daycare center at his house. And one of his auto-pen last acts before Joe Biden left office was to pardon Captain Mike Byrd, the D.C. officer who shot and killed January 6 protester Ashley Babbitt in cold blood during the protest on Capitol Hill January 6th. Video evidence showed Byrd shooting the unarmed Babbitt without any warning as she attempted to climb through a narrow window near a barricaded entryway to the Speaker of the House's office in the Capitol. Following an investigation, Byrd was cleared of any wrongdoing, although questions remain about the escalation to lethal force. I mean, there really wasn't an escalation. It was just from nothing to lethal force. In addition to Byrd leaving at one point his Glock 22 service weapon in a visitor center bathroom, that in February of 2019, he also had his police powers revoked on numerous occasions because he could not even meet semi-annual firearm qualification standards. Well, he apparently knows how to use one well enough to kill a Trump supporter. On Tuesday, investigative journalist Paul Sperry discovered recently and posted on Tuesday that the former lieutenant, now Captain Mike Byrd, has been running an unaccredited daycare center with his wife in their Maryland home since 2008, receiving $190 million taxpayer dollars. I mean, you want to talk about a demonstration of how much it pays in this country to murder political opposition of Democrats. And Ashley Babbitt wasn't even some high-profile politician. She's just some veteran who served her country. And you think about all the talk, the accusations of Trump being dangerous and Trump being a dictator. The reality of what occurred: an armed individual working under the direction of Nancy Pelosi. Capitol Hill police are under the Speaker's direction. Shoots an unarmed individual that was not in way of any sort of proximity that could have done him any physical damage. He did not say stop or I'll shoot. No warning whatsoever. All of this, there's footage of this. In fact, when he shoots her and she goes down to the ground, someone, turns around and in the footage you see, like right next to her are law enforcement. I'm not sure if they were D.C. or Capitol Hill police that were right there in the vicinity. The point being, she clearly wasn't any sort of danger because law enforcement was right there, at the same time in the same area that she was. The brilliant thing about Capitol Hill Police is they get to investigate themselves. And they are not subject to any open records request. They are not subject to sunshine law request. They essentially get to operate as secret police. So you have the Democrat Speaker of the House, an armed individual under her direction that is not subject to any transparency, shoots and kills an unarmed individual, is not only not held accountable for it, but is praised for it as a hero who saved lives. And we all know why, because he murdered a Trump supporter. And we know this because we live in a country in which if you are a police officer and you have a person that is black physically attack you, and you have to use force in order to save your own life, Democrats call for your head. Democrats have demonstrated through their behavior when there is a police shooting, they are always on the defense for the individual that was shot. They demand no peace, no justice. What do you think all the Black Lives Matter riots across this country were for? All because of a systemic issue with law enforcement killing unarmed people. But see, they happen to be the right sort of person. Look how they behave whenever somebody in law enforcement, under the direction of Nancy Pelosi, shoots and kills a completely unarmed, not physically attacking Trump supporter who's a veteran. They celebrate the guy, literally celebrate him. That's reality. And it turns out that he's running an unaccredited daycare center out of his home in which he's gotten $190 million from taxpayers. What a gem. We're going to get a traffic update, and then I want to talk about the pearl clutching that's coming from even some Republicans over Donald Trump's Greenland comments, his most recent ones, this back in the news. You've got Don Bacon. He's a Republican from Nebraska. Saying, this is appalling. This is absolutely appalling. Oh, calm down, sweetheart. Calm down. The thing that just annoys me are people who are incapable of responding to something or a comment with which they disagree in a measured way. Like, everything is outrageous. Everything is appalling. Everything is the worst thing that's ever been said. Just calm down. It's going to be okay. I mean, it's as if these people have never really dealt with anything adversarial in their lives to where if so, I can't believe he said that. Oh my God, what's going to happen? And it's worse when it comes to Democrats. I understand why they do it, but when Republicans do it, it's like you're just the word I want to use. I think you can't really use. Let's just say spineless. Traffic update.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see cloudy skies with a high near 68. Tonight, a 40% chance of showers throughout the night, otherwise mostly cloudy with a low around 52. For your Thursday, showers and possibly a thunderstorm with a high near 66. And taking a look at Friday, mostly sunny with a high near 59.
Michael Rappaport, he is an actor that for the longest while dominated his online presence with anti-Trump stuff, anti-Republican stuff. After October 7th, he realized the massive amount of anti-Semitism within the Democrat Party and became disillusioned, to say the least. He apparently announced on his podcast, I think it was yesterday, that he plans on running for mayor in 2029, I think, of New York. He's very against the newly elected mayor, newly sworn in mayor of New York because of his anti-Semitism and a lot of the people that he has posted to positions that are unapologetically anti-Semitic, and the fact that the Democrats are comfortably assimilating into being openly anti-Semitic, and so he now whether he's serious about it, actually will follow through, is yet to be seen. But that is something that he announced on his podcast, that he will be running for mayor next time around. GOP Representative Bacon calls Trump administration's comments on Greenland appalling. Oh, it's just so appalling. Get a grip. I mean, just. On Tuesday's The Lead, host Jake Tapper said Congressman, the White House just reiterated that U.S. military action via Greenland is not off the table. Can I first answer this? Because these are the questions that get asked. I mean, would you take military action off the table? You know what Trump says? No. Do you know why? Trump never shows his hand on anything. In Trump's mind, military action is not in any way a reasonable response. He's not going to say that. Because the minute you start saying things like that, well, then what about this? What about that? What about this thing over here? And you start, well, no, I won't do that. I will do that. And then if you're like, well, I'm not going to answer that. Oh, so, well, you answered this and that. And Trump's like, not, as far as Trump wants the recipient of the messaging to know, nothing is ever off the table. Nothing. You know, another time Trump did that? When he was very first running in the primary, 2016 election, and there were like 80 Republicans up on stage. And a question that was asked by the moderator for the purposes of isolating Trump was, raise your hand if you pledge to support whomever gets the nomination. And every Republican raised their hand except Trump. He didn't. That didn't mean he wasn't going to. Trump leaves everything on the table always. As far, maybe not in his head, but his perspective is, what advantage is there to revealing what I will and won't do? Now, if he feels, or what I won't do anyhow, what taking options off the table, all that does is, when it comes to dealing with the person across the table, is give them one less thing to think about. And the more things they have to think about, the better position of strength I'm coming from. And it also has the residual effect of sending messages to the people in the world, like the Putins and all these others, that this guy will do anything. The unintended consequence of the media and the Democrats and Republicans like Representative Bacon that clutch their pearls over the fact that, I mean, he said he might use the military against Greenland, is it reinforces what is a strength for him in terms of negotiating things when it comes to dealing with people like Putin, and that is the recognition that, man, this guy is crazy. So Tapper says to Bacon of the Republican Nebraska Congressman, the White House just reiterated that U.S. military action via Greenland is not off the table. Bacon said, quote, I hope Republicans stand up against this universally, oppose, and give the feedback to the president. This is appalling. Oh, God, this goes on about NATO. And they had more people per capita die in Iraq than this and that. And it's like, okay, calm down. Calm down, Esther. Now, here's a really interesting story. Greenland and Denmark request a special meeting with Rubio. Now, what has occurred apparently in this, whether this is deliberately leaked out or not, is that Rubio, behind closed doors, has told congressional Republicans that we want to buy it. I talked earlier in the program about how we as Americans, well, and let's just people in general, it's not even Americans, we get very accustomed to what we're accustomed to. And oftentimes, ideas that are way outside the norm, we instinctually, it feels wrong. And so a suggestion like buying Greenland, and I'll admit, the very moment that Trump very first started talking about Greenland, okay, yeah, whatever. Why? Well, because that's not what we're used to. So I do a check with myself. And I stop to think for a minute. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Okay, what are the reasons not to? And then what are the reasons to? Like, let's just say whatever means. The United States up and has Greenland. We decide we're going to acquire Greenland. Make a list. Here are all the reasons that there are downsides, that it is not a good thing to do, and here are all the reasons that are good to do it, reasons to do it. Now, Trump has presented numerous reasons that it is a good thing to do. I'll just tell you some of them without going into too much detail, and a little bit of history here is the fact that Greenland, by the way, is not an autonomous country. It's not a sovereign nation. It belongs to Denmark. Fun fact for all of you people on the left that no kings, no kings, no kings. Guess what? Denmark has a king. So Greenland actually is ruled by a king. So it'd be pretty humorous to hear all of these no kings people cry out at the prospect of Greenland, if Trump got his way, no longer being under the rule of a king. Denmark, or Greenland, belongs to Denmark. I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, at some point, Denmark decided to let Greenland start making his own friends, to put it simply, entering into unilateral agreements. Up until that point, Greenland wasn't allowed to do any of that stuff whatsoever. Any sort of agreement like, oh, this country wants to put some sort of interest in Greenland. Greenland, they didn't have any say in it. Denmark did it. So Denmark's like, you know what, we'll let you do kind of, you want to do some of that? That's cool. Taking the training wheels off. Guess who took advantage of that? China. Trump understands what China's doing. China is working its way, putting its footprint in all of these little places that the average person like, well, who cares? They're setting up shop in this African country. And, oh, who cares? They're setting up shop over here in Venezuela. Oh, who cares? They're taking over areas around Greenland and setting up shop and working out relations. Well, who cares about that? Well, who cares about it until they encompass geographically interest in areas all over this entire planet except the United States, and they essentially cut you off. Trump knows this. He knows what they're doing. Now, most presidents would say, well, it's not going to happen during my presidency, so do I care. But Trump is a leader who does care. And so he is trying to deal with that problem now. The reason he is trying to deal with it is because Denmark is not. Denmark has been allowing this problem to get out of control. Because like everyone else, what do I have to worry about for? This is why, whether one agrees with the approach, the way that he goes about it, you would think that this is where the lack of intellectual curiosity really, really destroys us. That when Trump started talking about this, I'll be honest, I didn't know why. You know what my first thought is? Well, why? Wasn't that hard to find out. Oh, well, this makes sense. I can see what his motivation is here. I mean, we have a military base in Greenland. And you got China clearly, strategically, like an Axis and allies, setting things up here to have the advantage over us in our hemisphere, surrounding us. So what Trump was doing, essentially putting Denmark on notice. Denmark, you want to make the moves that need to be made in order to stop this incursion from occurring, fine. But if not, I think we're in a good position that we can do this. That's what this is about. So now, this has come back up again. And oddly enough, the move in Venezuela has sort of like, well, who's taking over Venezuela? Want to take over? These are apples and tennis balls. These are, other than it's all about the current and future national security of the United States of America. But Greenland is not in danger of, quote, like being taken over by the United States, because the United States would essentially have to take over Denmark. Let's see here. This was posted by Greenland's foreign minister on social media. The government of Greenland and the Danish government have contacted the U.S. Department of State with a request for an early ministerial meeting between the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the Greenlandic Minister of Foreign Affairs and Research, Vivian Motzfeldt, and the Danish Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lars Loke Rasmussen. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss the United States' striking statement regarding Greenland. I'm going to say, I think that there is a distinct possibility that Greenland could become a territory of the United States, and it'll all be money. We do have a tremendous amount of resources. You look at, the amount of money that we throw to Somalians and to fake daycare centers and everything else. Some have argued, let them vote. Let the people of Greenland vote. And, offer up some financial incentive as well. Now, even that, I suppose a lot of people would not care for. But let's say, what if Puerto Rico wanted to vote and they say, you know what, we want to be a territory of Mexico instead of the United States, particularly people on the left. Would you be opposed to that? You probably wouldn't. You'd probably say that's their right. They should have the right to vote on that. I think that there is an argument to be made that they don't have the right to vote. Denmark is the one who controls that territory. If Denmark wants to sell it to the United States, it's Denmark's to sell. That's their right to do it. I think there's a very good chance that by the end of Trump's term, the acquisition of Greenland, or the transition of Greenland as a territory, for Denmark to the United States, could very well be realistic. Springfield Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Now, mentioning sort of the background behind Trump's desire to perhaps transfer Greenland from a territory of Denmark's to the United States, the reasons for it, doesn't mean that a person has to still think it's a good idea. But here's what I'm telling you, I do this because I understand the emotional reaction to hearing things that are so far outside the box of what we're accustomed to. You know, if this were back during the days of the Louisiana Purchase and we're going to get this and that, I mean, that's the way we did things. We haven't done that for a very, very long time. Was it 48 when we bought Alaska? We're not used to this sort of thing. That's not how our minds work. And so our instinct is to just think, well, that's crazy. Why is it crazy? So what I do, and I mean, I'm not going to pretend as if I physically actually do this, but I mentally ignore the emotional reaction and I do a list. Like, what are the reasons? If you're making a list, why acquire Greenland? And, I talked about some of those reasons in the previous segment regarding national security in China. I'm sure there are others, and they don't have to necessarily be earth-shattering reasons. Yeah, they can be somewhat, it might be a cool place to visit. You can go to Greenland without having to have a passport, stuff like that. And then what are all the downsides? Yeah, I'm sure that there are probably some. We're not talking about making it a state. It would be like Puerto Rico, which a vast majority of Americans, I would argue a vast majority of Americans don't even know Puerto Rico is part of the United States in that capacity. They have non-voting members in our Congress. They're a territory. And when you take the emotional reaction out of it and you make a list of here are the reasons to argue for it, here are the reasons against it, suddenly you potentially start to see things in a different way. May not come to a different conclusion, but you get to a conclusion based off factual realities as opposed to, well, you can't do that, based off of an emotional reaction. Trump has, well, I shouldn't say he has forced me, but Trump's existence and his decisions and the fact that he does things so differently have given me the opportunity to force myself to start thinking outside of emotional reactions and to look at things differently. And it kind of makes you see how Trump thinks a little bit and why it is that these things to him aren't audacious. These thoughts he has, they aren't like, he's not, I don't know, this is a big, it just makes sense. Because he doesn't allow the boundaries of we've always done it this way to affect him any whatsoever. Which, again, is why he has accomplished so much in life. Coming up, there, of course, have been, we've talked about it. We talked about last year as well, the effort in Missouri to eliminate the income tax here in the state to mimic states like, Florida and Tennessee. But another state may beat us to it. That next. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. If you have home buying needs or you know someone who does, you cannot make a better, more solid recommendation than Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. And the gratitude of making such a great recommendation to someone that is having a huge life decision, an alteration like that, that is very meaningful. For some people, buying and selling homes, they do it all the time, move around a lot, not that big of a deal. Maybe they do it for investment purposes, but for most people, it is a big deal. Oftentimes, you're talking about moving out of a childhood home. There are a lot of memories. It's not an easy thing to do, and you're talking about the new place that you're going to make new memories and create childhood memories for your children. It's very significant, and oftentimes people forget that, particularly those that do it every day. That would be realtors, except for Emily Johnson. She knows it. She understands it, and it's why so many people, including myself, recommend her when it comes to home buying needs and home selling needs. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. State Republicans in Georgia have released a new plan that would eliminate their state income tax for a majority of residents. The Appropriations Committee announced the plan would end income tax for the first $50,000 an earner makes, married couples $100,000, eventually income taxes for higher earners and businesses would also be eliminated. The report emphasized that the income tax plan would not raise the state sales tax, create a statewide property tax, nor mandate deep cuts to state services. And so perhaps this will be a little bit of competition for Missouri, right? You know, we've been talking about doing this and the need to get it done, and maybe having a little bit of race might help us get a little closer to that finish line. It certainly can't hurt. It's long been known, Karen is a name that you use to describe well, we know what it's used to describe. But if you happen to be named Jessica, you may rue the day that you use the name Karen, because according to numerous reports, Gen Z has decided that Jessica is the new name in place of what once was called a Karen. So buckle up if you're a Jessica. Glenn Beck's next. I'm Nick Reed.